Welcome, everybody. Got a good turnout so far. 62 of us here in a cozy virtual room. My name is Mary O'Malley, and I am a volunteer with Colorado 14ers Initiative, but also have close ties to the 14ers.com climbing community. So we are here today to bring back Nick Gianoutsos, who has done this presentation on intro to 14ering for the past 4 or 5 years, I think. And along with myself, there are also a handful of 14ers.com Facebook page admins that are in attendance who will help support this webinar, help answer some of your questions in the chat. The founder of 14ers.com may also be in this webinar. So be on your best behavior. Hi, Bill.
Hi, great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So I'm going to kick
My
this
pleasure.
off by, yeah, I'm going to kick this off by welcoming Nick back, who's been such a gracious educator for this community in the past several years. He's done this presentation both virtually as well as some of them in person. He is also a fellow Colorado 14ers Initiative volunteer, but also a longtime friend and partner of the 14ers.com climbing community. And like I said, he's a passionate educator. And experientially, what hopefully helps give him some credit is he's got over 150 14er summits under his belt across all seasons. He's also an avid skier, so some of those are also 14er ski descents. He has a really strong safety mindset, but also will introduce some topics about how to not just be safe out there, but how to be responsible out there as a recreationalist as well. So he gives really solid hiking advice. So glad to see all of you here able to partake in what he has to offer. There will be a chance for Q&A at the end, but also as questions pop up in your head, feel free to drop them in the chat. And those of us monitoring the chat will either answer your question or we'll direct them to Nick. So without further ado, Nick, thank you for being here again.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary. Thank you for the intro. Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is the 10th year that we are giving this talk, so we're pretty excited. Mary, I assume you can see my slides.
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. We asked everybody to take a poll question. It looks like we have 19 people from Colorado, 3 people from a neighboring state, 11 people from the Midwest, a couple from the East Coast, couple from the South. So thank you for joining us. All right. So I'm going to talk for about 45 minutes, and then Mary is going to give us about a 5-minute talk on leave no trace principles. We're going to go over 14er terminology. We're going to talk about how to plan a hike. We're going to talk about what to bring on your hike, what to do during your hike, what to do if you get in trouble, a little bit about the 14er community, and then afterwards we're going to have a group discussion and we will stick around and answer all of your questions, however long that takes. So a little bit about me. I moved to Colorado in 2007. I was a young lad, and I had a friend invite me that very first summer and say, "Hey, do you want to go hike Mount Bierstadt?" And I said, "Sure." And I had no idea what I was getting into. So I showed up. I didn't eat breakfast. I didn't understand why we were going so early. I wore a cotton t-shirt, and it was a long, hard day, and we made it to the summit. And I thought, wow, this is super cool. I could do this again. And so out of that one experience came a lot of other experience. I ended up meeting a lot of friends, a lot of people who are in this talk tonight. Ended up climbing a lot of peaks, skiing some peaks, going to some other states, doing some mountaineering, and just had a really amazing time and met a lot of great people in this community. And it all started with this. And so the purpose of this talk is I think back to this guy, myself, almost 20 years ago. And I think of all the things I didn't know and all the mistakes I had to learn from along the way. And so my goal is to try to share with you some of the things that I didn't know and I've learned in the last 20 years that kind of help you on your journey. So let's start with the very basic. What is a 14er? A 14er is a mountain with an elevation that is greater than 14,000 feet and is less than 15,000 feet. Since the highest peak in Colorado is Mount Elbert at 14,433 feet, anything higher than 14,000 is a 14er in Colorado. There are 58 peaks. Likewise, a 13er is a peak that is between 13,000 and 14,000, and there are a lot of those. And just for reference, you can spell out 14er, you can write 14er. Don't put an N in there. Don't put an apostrophe in there. We're trying to keep it clean. All right, where are the 14ers located? So the star here is in Denver. You can see that there's a handful of peaks pretty close to Denver, and then they spread out. There's 57 peaks, which are mostly on public lands. Nearly all of them are, except for one peak, Calabria, is privately owned, and you have to pay the ranch $150 when you go. Everything else is free and on public lands. And who owns public lands? We do. So we should get out there and explore them. Surrounding the 14ers are 764 13ers. And the 14ers have gotten very crowded in recent years. Right next door to almost every 14er is a 13er that will have almost nobody on it. If you want to be alone all day on a mountain, go hike 13ers. But that's probably less fun than hiking 14ers. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. The 14ers are broken out by range. We have 6 in the Front Range. These are within an hour and a half drive of Denver. Then you get out to the Swatch Range. This goes from Leadville all the way down to Slida. We have 15 peaks. In the 10-mile and Mosquito Range, we have 6. That's kind of out around Breckenridge, Fairplay. The Elks out around Aspen has 7. The San Juans, which is down around Telluride, has about 14, and the Sangre de Cristos, the Blood of Christ, there's 10 14ers down there. Let's keep going. All right, so the 14ers are broken down into class ratings of the trail. The easiest trail rating is class 1. This is usually a trail that has been built by an organization like the Colorado 14er Initiative. It's easy to follow. It's pretty easy to hike on. The next level is class 2, and class 2 kind of has a subcategory. There's regular class 2 and there's difficult class 2. And some of the more difficult hiking, it may require a little bit of route finding. You may have to put your hands down occasionally to keep your balance. You may end up hiking on talus and scree. And so we can see kind of here on the left, the trail's a little less defined, maybe a little more uneven, etc. Then the next level is class 3. Class 3 is technically climbing, which involves, the definition is scrambling or unroped climbing. You must use your hands most of the time to hold the terrain or find your route. This may be caused by a combination of steepness and extreme terrain. These are two kind of classic class 3 cruxes. On the left is Wetterhorn Peak, and on the right is Wilson Peak. Most of what we're going to be talking about today is class 1 and class 2, and we're going to talk a little bit about class 3. What we're not going to talk about is class 4. There's a handful of peaks like Little Bear and Capitol Peak, which are class 4, which is defined as the terrain is often steep and dangerous. Falls can be fatal. Some routes can be done without rope because the terrain is stable. I highly, highly recommend that you wear helmets when you do class 3 and class 4 climbing. So the good news is if we break out the 14ers, here's a rank of all 58 peaks based on the standard route, what the classification is. We have about 6 class 1 peaks. We have a lot of regular class 2 peaks, 6 difficult class 2 peaks, and then we got a couple easy class 3, regular class 3, and then you can see the hardest peaks down here. And so what we're going to focus on today is what I kind of label like beginner class 1, class 2, and then we're going to talk a little bit about difficult class 2 and into class 3, and we're going to save the advanced stuff for another talk, for another night. All right, another thing to consider is the quality of the rock. Not all rock is the same. So on the left is the crestone conglomerate of the Crestone Peaks. This is a very fun, solid rock to climb on. And on the right is actually a class 2 section of the Maroon Bells. and it's just loose rock where every time you take a step, things kind of move a little bit. So sometimes you might feel more comfortable on the left being on like class 3 on solid rock than being on class 2 on really loose rock. So that's something to keep in mind. All right, let's go over a couple terms here. So when we look at this mountain, what we can see here is there's a lot of trees in the bottom, and then we get to a certain elevation, and then there's no more trees all the way up to the summit. This is known as tree line, and it ranges between 11,600 feet and 11,800 feet, depending on the latitude of where you are in the state. And this is the point where the terrain is too extreme for trees to grow. And this is important because if you're hiking, most of your hikes are going to be starting around 10 or 11,000 feet. You're going to be below tree line. And then you're going to hike to tree line and go above tree line. And when you are above tree line, you're exposed to more wind, lightning, thunderstorms, etc. So there's a little bit of risk, and it's a little bit safer when you drop down below tree line. And does anybody know this is Wilson Peak? Does anybody know what Wilson Peak is famous for? Yeah, it is on the Coors Light can. When you turn the mountains blue, you're turning Wilson Peak. And I hope you guys are drinking better beer than Coors Light. But when you see someone drinking a Coors Light, take a look at the can and you'll recognize one of 14ers. A couple other terms I'll go over today. We'll talk a little bit about a gully is just a low spot between peaks. We already talked about tree line, a ridge, the face of a peak, and the saddle is kind of the low point between two peaks. Well, let's keep going here. Okay, along the route, sometimes people will try to help you out and they will mark the route with what's called cairns, and it's basically just stacking rocks. Or if you're from Boulder, you might refer to this as art. But on the 14ers, we kind of use it as a direction of finding a trail or finding the way to go. Normally, it points you in the right direction, but you don't always know who built the cairn. So you want to be a little skeptical when you see it and use your other information and route descriptions to make sure that you're going in the right direction. And also, a number of the summits have what's called benchmarks, which were placed by the U.S. Geological Survey. This is the one from Mount Bierstadt, was placed in 1955. When you find the benchmark, you know you're on the summit. If you get to the summit and there's not a benchmark, don't freak out. A lot of them have kind of worn away or unfortunately been stolen. So about half the peaks or less have benchmarks remaining, but they're pretty cool. Take your picture with one. You know you've made it. Okay, now we're going to talk about planning your hike and what you need to do to get ready. So, the website, 14ers.com, and the group was founded by Bill Middlebrook. This is usually when I say a bunch of stuff about Bill, but he may be joining us today, so I'm going to be nice. But Bill's a computer programmer by trade. And a long time ago, at the height of the dot-coms, he designed some software to do a very novel thing. He could take a fax machine and turn a fax into an email. And that's how people would place orders at the time. And so he developed this software company. And then he sold his company and retired right before the dot-coms crashed. And he moved to Colorado and he lived in Breckenridge and was a ski bum for a long time. And now he spends a lot of time in Florida fishing, but he still comes back to ski and hike peaks. And so Bill, being a programmer at heart, needed something to stay busy and challenge his programming skills. So he started the website 14ers.com, first as a hobby of his, where he would go out and take photos and post them online. And then eventually the website grew into having route descriptions, a forum, and everything that you have online today, which I'm about to show you in a minute. Last year, Bill got really famous when the local magazine 5280 interviewed him and wrote a whole story about his life, which is available for free online. And I recommend checking that out. Okay, so I'm going to show you a detailed breakdown of how to plan a hike using the 14ers.com website. I also want to talk a little bit about the app. Everything or all the pertinent information is also available on the app. and also has a map that actually shows your location and the route for each of the peaks. So we're going to look at the website because it's easier to see, but then just know you should download the map and take it with you as well. So, load up. Okay, are you seeing the website right now?
There you
Okay,
go.
take that as a yes. All right, so here's the website. All the extra details, if you scroll down, you can kind of see all the things that I'm going to walk you through today. So the first thing we're going to look at is let's look at some peaks. So here are all the 14ers. I'm going to list them by name, and we are going to plan a hike on Mount Bierstadt, which was my first 14er in the opening in my opening slide. So here's the details of Bierstadt, the height. If we click on routes, we can see a listing of routes. If we click on the map, we can see all the routes that come up to the summit. I'm going to pick the standard route, which is the West Slopes. We'll click on that. And all the information you need to plan your hike is located right here in one spot. Mount Bierstadt is a class 2 hike. The risk factor is broken down. The exposure is low, meaning, how close do you get to a cliff or how dangerous is a fall? Rockfall is moderate. The route finding is low, meaning it's pretty easy to find the trail and stay on it. And the commitment is pretty low, meaning if weather comes in, it's easier and quicker to get off this mountain than some other mountains. Here's the trailhead with information of how to get to it. Here's the route description, which is a pretty basic overview of it. And then there's going to be a handful of photos. Here's the map. We're going to start at Guanella Pass and just hike up to the peak and then go back the same way we came. And then here's a series of photos that will accompany the description and just take you through, what the trail is going to look like the whole way. And if you download the app and you download the route description for this peak, you'll have all this information on your phone just to go right up to the top. Additionally, we have our weather forecast. So we have our daily weather forecast, and then we have a detailed weather forecast, which we'll go through in later detail further on in the talk. And then a really cool new feature is this 3D function. And basically allows you to get a Google Earth view of the hike. So here's the route, here's the parking lot where we started. We're making it through the willows. We're starting to come up the peak. There's the summit of Mount Bierstadt. Boom, there's the summit. And then our plan is just turn around and come right back down. Okay. I think there is also additionally people write. Go ahead, Bill. Bill, did you want to add anything?
I did not. Other than one thing, you can also see that static map that's next to that 3D button that you pressed. So if you go back there, right next to that,
This guy, this JPEG?
yeah, just to show that we don't get totally away from the traditional topographical maps. This is in the app as well, and if you printed this route description, this would be printed on the paper if you took it like a lot of us used to back in the day. So people can still use static maps instead of relying on the interactive maps that are on the site or on the app. That's all.
All right, cool. Thanks.
Hmm.
And I really like the flyby feature. When did you add that?
I added that beginning of the winter. I started it
Okay.
last fall when I was developing some of the map server stuff to all the topographical maps, and then with the goal of adding the 3D route flyovers. And I just finished them in both the map mobile apps, iOS and Android. Definitely
Awesome.
very helpful to have that offline. Good tent viewing.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill.
Mhm.
Let's see, so where? Okay, here we go. All right, should be seeing my slides again.
It's thinking about it.
There we go.
It's
Do you
those
see me now?
5,000 unread emails that causes computer to be slow.
Exactly. Okay, there.
Okay, so go download the 14ers app, and if you got any complaints, talk to Bill. Okay, going back to the poll, I said, how many 14ers have you hiked? So we have 28 people who are looking to hike their first peak. That's awesome. We have 8 who have done less than 10, 3 who have done less than 20, and a couple people, one person over 30, and then a couple people who have finished, which is probably us. So this is great. This is exactly, it looks like about 90% of the people in here have done less than 20 peaks. So this is perfect. This is who we're geared toward. And then I asked, what are you guys here to learn about? The number one answer was planning a trip. So hopefully that was informative. The second one was the keys to success and then staying safe. And then a couple people wanted to know what our 14er. So hopefully by now you know what a 14er is. But if you don't, we'll keep talking about it. Okay, so if you're looking to hike your first peak, where is a good place to start? Here is a list of the peaks that I recommend. We just did a little planning for Mount Bierstadt, Brazen Torreys, Quandary, Sherman. These are all within about an hour and a half drive to Denver. Gray's Peak is about 3,000 feet, and then you can just hike 600 more feet of elevation, and you can gain Torrey's Peak and then come down the same way. Quandary Peak's out by Breckenridge, Sherman's out by Fairplay. So one other thing to think about is we talked about the class rating, and people tend to think a lot about mileage, but also to take into account is what is the elevation gain? Because this is really how hard you're going to work to get to the summit. And so one example is, we have 2 peaks here. We can compare Quandary and Sherman. Quandary is a class 1, Sherman's a class 2. So, you might think, oh, Quandary is going to be easier. But then when we actually look at the elevation gain, we can see that Sherman's about, to hike Quandary, you're going to have to gain 1,300 more feet than you would with Sherman. And this is because you can drive closer and farther up the mountain at the Mount Sherman trailhead. So if you were to go out and hike, even though this is class 2, that 1,300 less feet, the 2 less miles is probably going to make it a little easier, and the difference on the trail isn't going to be that much. So we kind of take all of these things into account, with probably the biggest one being, the class rating is important, but then also thinking about how much elevation gain and how long of a day you're going to have. If you've hiked class 1 and class 2 and you want to start thinking about class 3, these are some of the recommended class 3 routes. From Mount Bierstadt, there's a class 3 traverse called the Sawtooth that goes over to Mount Blue Sky. That's a great first class 3. If you do the Keyhole route on Long's Peak as a class 3, that's a very long hike to get there. Blonking, Ellingwood, Kit Carson, and then my favorite is Wetterhorn, which is down by Lake City. All right, so that's you got some good peaks to start with. You know how to plan. What do we pack? What do we bring? So we recommend following the 10 essential systems for, spending time in the outdoors. It works for backpacking. It works great for 14ers. You want to make sure and have your navigation, which is in the old days was a map and compass. These days it's a phone or maybe a printout of a map. Make sure you have plenty of sun protection. You will burn very easily at 14,000 feet. Always bring sunglasses, and it doesn't hurt to have a cheap backup pair of sunglasses. And make sure you have sunscreen. You want insulation, extra clothing. You make sure you have a headlamp or a flashlight with you, some first aid supplies. If you don't want to go out and buy a little first aid kit, you can just go into your medicine cabinet and just grab the medicine that you might normally need. Things like ibuprofen, Tylenol, Benadryl, Imodium. a couple Band-Aids, a little bit of duct tape. That can get you through a lot of situations. A way to start a fire is recommended, but often you're above tree line. We're also getting into a fire ban, so be cautious with that one. Repair kit and tools, that's really more for backpacking, but nutrition, make sure you have plenty of food, hydration, extra water, and then emergency shelter. And so, kind of what these look like when we go out is you want to dress in layers. So, you want to have like, your base layer, then maybe a long sleeve shirt over that, then maybe like a puffy jacket and like a rain jacket. And you can do the same thing if you wanted to wear rain pants or long pants, shorts if you want. Make sure you wear sunscreen. Hiking boots or tennis shoes are totally fine. You don't have to go out and buy some expensive hiking shoes, the Hike 14ers. You can do it in your normal tennis shoes. As you start to climb more and spend more time outdoors, you might want to invest in better shoes. We talked about hat and sunglasses. And then I like to just bring a ski cap and some gloves. And basically, what happens is throughout the day, you're going to be adding layers and then taking off layers. So in the morning, it's going to be cold. You're going to probably put on all your layers. You're going to start hiking. You're going to heat up a little bit. You might take off a layer. Then the sun's going to come up. It's going to warm up. You're going to take off more layers. You're going to get to the summit. You're going to sit down. It's windy. You're going to put on more layers, etc. You're going to be doing that all day. And that's how you regulate heat and stay warm. And then in your backpack, I recommend bringing 2 to 3 liters of water, especially in the beginning. You want to bring more water than you think you'll drink. And as you get used to hiking and do more trips, you'll start to understand what your body needs and be able to fine tune that a little bit. Make sure you have plenty of food and snacks. You are going to burn a lot of calories and you're going to lose weight. So feel free to bring food and whatever you feel comfortable eating, whatever you like, and you will eat on the hike, bring it along. We talked about navigation. I bring a headlamp with me on every hike. They're small, regardless of if it's going to be all during the day, I still bring one because if something happens and you have to spend the night, this is a good way to signal search and rescue. It's also a good way to get down in the dark. If they don't weigh much, I recommend bringing one. And then an emergency bivy is kind of like a emergency blanket, except it's kind of a mix between an emergency blanket and a sleeping bag that you can just climb in. They compact down really small, and you can buy them at an outdoor store. All right, so what are the keys to a safe and successful hike? The most important one is to start early in the morning to avoid lightning. You want to start hiking by around 5 or 6 a.m. Try to get to the summit sometime around 10 a.m. and then be off the mountain and heading down by the time any storms come rolling in the afternoon. I recommend taking a break every hour, even if you're feeling good, just stop, eat something, drink some water, make sure you're staying hydrated. Sometimes you'll be really excited and you just want to keep going, and you keep going, and you're not taking care of these things. And a couple hours go by, and then all of a sudden you feel dehydrated, exhausted. So make sure that you're eating and hydrating along the way. When you're planning enough time, I like to estimate, especially if you're just starting out, estimate about 700 feet of gain per hour. Today, I hike around 1,000 feet per hour. The fastest I've ever hiked is about 1,200 feet per hour to kind of give you an idea. So when we were looking at Mount Bierstadt and it was about 2,800 feet, you should think like, okay, that's going to be about 4 hours on the way up. Maybe I'll sit on the summit for half an hour and then 2.5, maybe 3 hours on the way down. So that's how you can kind of plan your hike. I already mentioned about eating before you're hungry, drinking before you're thirsty, and selecting good partners. Also important is avoiding bad partners, which is something that you don't know until you start hiking with somebody. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to have Mary O'Malley join us. Or Mary is a peak steward with the Colorado 14er Initiative. She's also one of the admins on the 14ers Facebook group. Not anymore. Okay.
Anyway,
She retired from that role.
I
Um,
did. I did.
yeah, and so Mary's going to talk to us about Leave No Trace. So go ahead, Mary.
Yeah. So, Just a little real quick, for anybody who doesn't know what Colorado 14ers Initiative does, we've been around for over 30 years and are a nonprofit that works in tandem with the Forest Service. So all the work that we do on the over 40 14er trails that we maintain is at the direction of the Forest Service. So we love being of service to this great community and helping y'all get out there. But a huge part of what we do, as Nick said, I'm part of the Peak Steward program. I spend a lot more time with this program than I used to, so I haven't had as much time to be an admin on the page, so had a little bit of a transition there. But yeah, a big part of what we do from an education perspective is not only do we want to help people understand why we're doing so much work out there, but also just understanding the environment that they're going into, because it's part of what makes these places so very, very special is the sheer nature of the alpine environment and the joy of getting out there and enjoying it. But at the same time, it's really important to understand that this is the harshest environment on the planet, believe it or not. It is studied extensively for that reason. The plants, the animals, everything that exists above tree line is very specifically adapted for that environment. But it also means it's very easy for non-native impacts to destroy it. And that would be us. So a huge part of CFI's mission is to spread the word about leave no trace, about all the 7 principles, but I'm just going to touch on a couple that are really kind of the no-brainers of getting out there responsibly, but you'd be amazed how easy it is to not think about some of these things when you're tired, especially on descent when, you're just ready to be back to the vehicle. One of the easiest things that we can ask everybody to do is to just stay on those trails that we've built. They're not just because they look good and give you a path, but they're specifically designed to avoid certain animal habitats and to keep you on a durable surface so that you're not causing what this first picture demonstrates, which is people walking side by side on the fragile tundra. And, an area like that does not restore within our lifetimes. It can take up to 100 years for just 1 inch of topsoil to regenerate in the alpine. And so considering it can take as few as 5 footsteps to destroy an alpine plant, you can understand that 100 years to restore that area is pretty significant. So asking, for community effort here for everybody to stay on the beautiful trails that we've built is a huge, huge help. It is the #1 thing that you can do out there. And then just to touch on a couple of the basics, like leaving what you find. Again, it takes the plants so long to grow out there, and the animals need them. The animals have a really short gathering season during the summer. And so just leaving the environment as it is another key thing that you can do out there. And it does take all of us because, for example, last year we recorded 265,000 hiker use days across all the 14ers that we monitor. And so imagine if 265,000 people walk across your lawn, wouldn't look great, right? So like Mount Bierstadt, which Nick has alluded to, often sees upwards of 30,000 people in a 5-month summer span. And so you can imagine that the amount of destruction that can occur out there is significant. So it takes a community effort to really stay on track with the leave no trace principles. So leaving what you find, packing out your trash. Again, some of these things seem like no-brainers, but it takes a conscious thought effort when you're out there. And then for any of you that are hiking with your dogs, we don't want wildlife to be disturbed out there. Pika can die really quickly from a heart attack. And there are animals up there that don't actually have a defense mechanism against dogs either. So that poses another problem because it means that they're easy to capture and it's easy for dogs to spot. So even if you're in an area that doesn't necessarily have a leash law, I like to encourage people to think about the fact that they're visitors to these environments and their dogs are visitors. And so, leaving the wildlife undisturbed is the best thing that you can do. And it also helps keep your dog safe as well from wildlife attacks. But along with that, we have ways to consider, both our own and that of our furry friends. So again, going back to the basics of what you can do, packing out any of the trash that you create, means that you're not leaving things in the environment that don't naturally occur there. We're not introducing new bacterias into the environment that can be harmful to the animals. So it's just, keeping in mind it's a fragile environment. It's beautiful. Let's help keep it beautiful. Be considerate of the wildlife. Stay on trail, find rocks if you need to sit down and rest. And the name of the game is just making it a community effort, because even though we peak stewards are out there often, you'll probably run into many of us over the course of a summer. We're just a crew of about, I think we're 40 to 50 people versus a community of many thousands. So I'd just invite you to think about how you can do your part when you're out there and keep these leave no trace principles in mind, and how fragile the environment is. And would just invite you to participate in keeping things so neat and pretty out there and help these environments thrive. Back to you, Nick.
All right. All right, Mary, thank you for talking dirty to us.
That joke never works.
Well, because everybody's muted. All right, let's talk a little bit about what happens when you get up to elevation, how your body reacts. Okay, so this is a graph. On the right, or on the left, we have elevation, and on the right, we have oxygen levels. So you ever have a friend come visit you from Florida and they get off the airplane in Denver, and the first thing they say is, I can't breathe here, and what they're noticing is there's about approximately 16% less oxygen in the air. When we go up to the top of Mount Elbert, that number drops down to about 62%. So you're going to have 22% roughly less oxygen when you get up there. And I should say these statistics also depend on barometric pressure and other factors in the environment, but it just kind of gives you an idea of why, you're fine at Denver and it's hard to breathe at Mount Elbert. If you've ever read John Krakauer's book on Mount Everest, um, he talks about the death zone, which is above 25,000 feet. And that's where you have to have oxygen. That's where your body can't replenish itself without oxygen. But we are way below that. So we don't need oxygen to climb 14ers, but there is a significant decrease in oxygen, especially if you're coming from somewhere lower than Denver. If you're coming from sea level, you're going to notice that a lot. So what happens? So when you're in the mountains, you will from time to time feel some of these effects. You may have like a mild headache. You might feel a little lightheaded. Your stomach might kind of tighten up. You may not really feel like eating. You may feel tired. Your brain kind of slows down. And it's just part of having less oxygen in the air and also exerting yourself. Now, these are symptoms that kind of come and go for most people, but sometimes they can start to get serious. So if you start getting a really bad headache, or anybody is vomiting, or people start to become a little disoriented, that's the time to go down. Because basically, as you keep going higher up towards the summit, these symptoms are probably going to get worse. And if you go down, they're going to get better. And so, these are the kind of decisions you have to make while you're out on the trail. If you're have been hiking and you're a couple hundred feet below the summit and you're starting to get like a really mild headache, you're probably okay to keep going, tag the summit, and then drop down. But if you're an hour into the hike and you are not feeling good at all, and your stomach's just really upset, or your head's just pounding, it's probably time to turn around, because it's going to get worse as you keep going up. All right, let's talk a little bit about what to do if you get into trouble. Hopefully, you don't have to make this phone call, but if you do, here's what to expect. So here is a listing of headlines that I grabbed from over the course of like 2 months in the middle of a summer. And it's everything from rise in 14ers death reflects rise in climbers and fearless behavior. Father and son rescued from 14er, Quandary Peak after cliffing out. Boulder man falls to his death while climbing on Mount Princeton. One after the other, two 14er rescues Monday, and etc. And so if you are like watching the headlines in the local news throughout the summer, you will see a lot of these in the headlines. Every year we lose, a handful of people. Usually it's between 6 and 12 people on the 14ers in some fashion like this. And relative to the number of people, there's hundreds of thousands of people who go hike peaks every year. So it's a pretty small number, but there is still a risk, and people do have fatalities every year. And we want to make sure that you guys are not in that group. And this hit really close to home for me a few years ago. One of our close climbing friends, Rob Jansen, died near Snowmass Peak in a rock fall. There was a big rock slide, and he got caught and taken down the mountain. In the bottom left there is a can of Dale's Pale Ale. Dale's was Rob's favorite beer. And if you drink Dale's, they always have a little message on the bottom there. And so they put a message for Rob that said, "Climb on, Rob," shortly after his death. So anyway, one of the reasons, Rob was a big reason that I put this talk together. And, one of the things I just want to remind people is, man, the mountains are amazing. The friends you make are incredible. But, if somebody has a really tragic accident, it can really it kind of changes the way that you think about your friend group, think about your hobbies. So part of the reason to stay safe out there. Okay, so what are some of the hazards that we're going to be aware of? So what I've done here is I've kind of listed them based on the month of the year. So early in the climbing season, June and sometimes into July, not this year, there will be snow on the routes. We'll talk about that. And then early summer, you get into monsoon season, and that's when you're most likely to have lightning and thunderstorms. And then later in the season, kind of when we get late August, early September, it's possible that we could actually get some new snowstorms and some weather can come in. And especially into October, we start getting snow regularly. And then anytime you're on a 14er, any time of year, you could always fall. You could always get caught in rock fall or a rock slide, and you could always get off route and go the wrong way and have to spend the night somewhere. So we're going to talk about these in more depth. So when we start hiking kind of early in the summer, there is leftover snow. Here's a picture from Mount Princeton a couple years ago in the middle of June. There are these snow patches here. And what happens is in the morning, the snow is usually pretty solid and you can walk across it. And then in the afternoons, it starts getting really mushy and slushy. And so it's a little dangerous both ways, though, because it can be kind of slick and fast in the morning and really loose and gloppy in the afternoon. And so one of the things we recommend for early season hiking is micro spikes. When you go on 14ers.com, you can go to trail conditions and people will talk about what the route is like and they'll talk about whether there's snow or not. And you'll see comments that say, micro spikes are recommended or micro spikes are not needed. And so that's what they're talking about there. This is the snow water equivalent graph for the state of Colorado for right now. So this green line in the middle is the average snowpack in the mountains. The blue line is the best snowpack we've ever had. The red line is the previous worst snowpack that we've ever had. And the black line, unfortunately, is this year's snowpack. And if you are a skier, you know that this is literally the worst year ever. And so what this means is it's been a terrible ski year, but there's a lot less snow in the mountains than usual. And what happened was last week we kind of got that big storm, and that actually extended us a little bit past the red line. But normally there's about 17 inches, or I'm sorry, there's about 10 inches of snow water equivalent in the mountains. And this year we're down to about 2 inches of snow water equivalent. So what that means is things are melting fast and our hiking season is probably going to start pretty early, probably weeks earlier. It depends on what happens if we get more snow. There's a storm system coming through next week. And so that could kind of extend this black line out. But basically, when that black line gets down close to zero, you don't have to worry about microspikes and it's open season for hiking. Another thing that we're keeping an eye on, I guess, is this has been the hottest year in Colorado's recorded history. It's been on average about 8 degrees warmer. And so that's part of the reason coinciding with the drought and not having snow. But this is going to, you know, cause some fires this summer, and we're going to talk about fires a little bit later. But we are in an abnormal year, or this might possibly be the new normal. So just kind of be aware of that we might see some things that are a little bit different this year because of these warmer temperatures and because of less snow. All right, let's talk about weather forecast. So on the site, Bill had a link where you could click on the peak you wanted to climb and it would hone in right on the mountain. We want to pay attention to what the projected elevation is because 14,000 feet is going to be a little bit colder than 13,000 feet. And then here's the daily forecast for each of the days when you're planning in advance. Usually the forecast kind of comes into focus about 2 or 3 days in advance. You can start to get an idea of what conditions are going to be like maybe 7 to 10 days in advance, but it's not until you're a couple days out that the models can really form and give you a good outlook. And then if you click on the detailed weather forecast on the graphs, this is kind of the breakdown of everything that's happening. So we have 2 days here we have a Monday and a Tuesday. The day times are in white. The red is the temperature, so we can actually see, okay, we're going to warm up. We're going to be in the 50s around 11 a.m. Same thing. The next day is going to get up to 58. Around 2 p.m., we can see the wind. And the main thing we want to look for is there any rain in the forecast? Is there any thunder in the snowcast, which means in the forecast, which means lightning? And so this is a pretty typical day in the summer. And so what we want to focus on here is kind of what is our hiking window? In the morning, we'll look at the Tuesday on the right. You know, Early morning, there's not expected to be any chance of storms. And then around 11 a.m. or noon, afternoon thunderstorms, which is a pretty typical forecast. So we want to be hiking here and we want to be off the mountain, back at the car, eating lunch before these storms come rolling in. And this is why you want to start around 5, 6 a.m. on most days. If we look at the left, we can see that we actually have a shorter window. Instead of storms rolling in at noon, we can have storms as early as 10 a.m. is what's projected. So Tuesday, the day on the right, would be a better day to hike because we have a better window. Or if you still wanted to hike on Monday, you would just want to start earlier. You would probably want to be on the summit by 8 or 9 a.m. and then heading down before these storms come in. So here's what to look for while you're hiking. And this is just kind of a simplified overview, but you should be looking up at the clouds and paying attention to what's happening. And it's easy to get distracted by the route, the rocks, the trail, and you're not looking up. But you should be looking up every once in a while just to see what's happening. So, if you're lucky, you'll have a bluebird day like this. This is possibly early morning. Skies look great, green light, have at it. And then during the day, you'll start to see these kind of puffy cotton balls start to build up. This isn't really threatening, but it's something you want to keep an eye on. It's a progression from this to this. And then as these start to build up and start to group together, they might turn into this. And this is when you want to be heading down or off the mountain. The other thing you want to look at is how high thunderstorms build up. So the taller these clouds get and the darker the bellies get, the closer you are to a thunderstorm and a lightning strike. So awesome day is if it looks like this all day. A lot of days it'll look like this for most of the hike, and then hopefully you're down by the time it turns into this. Keep looking up, keep looking in all directions, and pay attention to what's happening. So let's talk about lightning. Here is a graph of lightning strikes in Colorado based on the day of the year. You can see that not much happens for most of the year. And then when we get into monsoon season, into July and August, this is when the most when Colorado gets the most lightning flashes per day. So that's right in the middle of summer in monsoon season. Keep going here. Here is a graph of the number of casualties from people who have died in Colorado by lightning strike based on the hour of the day. And this is over a 38-year period. So we can see that there's been, just a handful of unlucky people who were struck by lightning. And then right around noon, boom, they go up. And between noon and 4, that's when the majority of the lightning strikes happen. So again, this is why we're targeting this window, from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. to get up the mountain and get down before lightning starts kicking in, thunderstorms kick in. And if you're really into weather, there's a website called mountain-forecast.com. Some people really nerd out about weather forecasts, and it's a big advantage when you're climbing because understanding what the weather forecast is, understanding what's happening, watching it develop can really give you an advantage in the mountains because you have to make decisions sometimes about whether to turn around or whether to go for it based on what the forecast is and based on what you're seeing in the sky. And also, Chris Tomer was a local meteorologist. He unfortunately just moved to Chicago, but he does a blog every week about the mountains and what the hiking forecast is going to be. And I think he's still doing it. He had one today about this storm front that's coming in next week for the Colorado mountains. So I hope that Chris is going to keep making YouTube videos for us. But he's an avid hiker. He's a 14er finisher and he loves the mountains. And every week he puts together a little video saying, what the forecast is going to do from a meteorologist perspective. So I recommend both of these. And then, unfortunately, it's now become just a part of hiking is air quality. We're definitely going to have fires this summer because of the heat and lack of snow, and we could have a lot of fires. And so two websites that I like to use are airnow.gov shows this is a federal science web page that shows what the air quality is around the US, and you can zoom in on Colorado. There's another site that I like called Weather Underground. And this one actually shows you can click on, show all active fires. This is from the past, but all the little fire symbols are where there's an active fire, and then all the darkness around it is smoke. And so you can actually see when we have big fires or we have smoke coming in from other areas, you can actually see where the smoke's coming from. And so sometimes different ranges are affected more by smoke than others. If we have smoke coming up from the south, the Sangres may be pretty smoky, but the Front Range may be okay, or vice versa. This was a photo of Capitol Peak from 2020, which was the year from hell, when Colorado actually had its three biggest fires all in the same year. We were going up Capitol Peak, and this is sunrise coming up, and there's so much smoke in the air that the terrain just looks like you're in like Lord of the Rings or something. There is no filter on this. This is just like a straight photo. So that was a really rough year. One thing that I recommend that you can do to protect yourself from smoke is wear a KN95 mask, kind of like people wore during the pandemic. These are actually made to filter out small particulates and they weigh nothing. And I just throw one in my backpack. And if you're ever in a situation where, a wildfire kicks up, you know, miles away, but all the smoke's coming at you, or you're stuck out there, this can really, really save your lungs because if you're out there breathing all that, it can kind of mess you up for a couple weeks. So I recommend that. Okay, so let's talk about kind of summarize what we've been over. We've talked a lot about some different skills. If you go out and you start and you begin on class 1 and class 2, hiking, some of the beginner peaks, you want to be thinking about, you're going to be learning about trip planning. You're going to be learning about the weather, reading a forecast, reading the sky. You're going to learn about how your body reacts to elevation. what is a good full day for you, what is too much, how much water you need to drink, which foods work really well for you. As you kind of gain that experience and you learn that, then you can start moving into some of the harder peaks. Here you start doing more technical trip planning. When you're hiking, you actually have to do a little more route finding because the trails aren't as defined. You start doing loose gullies, loose rocks. You may start doing some technical climbing, some class 3. Hopefully by this point you're starting to find some good partners, some people you trust and you enjoy hiking with. And then you may be ready for like longer days, 10, 12, maybe even 14-hour days. And then by the time you get to the really hard peaks, the class 4 peaks like Capitol and Little Bear, it's kind of like a test of everything you learned. The weather and how your body reacts still matter, but you're also on really technical terrain and have long days. And so if you develop these skills in easier peaks, and if you make mistakes, you kind of want to we want you to make small mistakes and learn from those mistakes before you get to these harder peaks. Okay, so if you get into trouble, there's a couple things you can do. The first and easiest thing is pull out your cell phone and just call 911, or you can call the county sheriff. Bill has on every route description the direct number to the county sheriff, but 911 works too. Just tell them, hey, I'm on this 14er, where you're located, what the problem is, etc. And they will send out search and rescue. If you don't have cell phone reception, it's a really good idea to have like a spot tracker or a Garmin InReach. I have the Garmin InReach Mini. These cost, I haven't looked at them recently. They're usually a couple $100, and then you pay a monthly fee of around $10 a month for it. This allows you to send a text message from anywhere. It also has a tracking function. So if there's someone at home who's worried about you, you can have it send your location every 15, 20 minutes, and they can actually see you on a website and know that you're okay, etc. And then if you need help, it has a SOS button, which will call search and rescue. The newer iPhones also have satellite capability. I have not personally used one, but that's something else that is just technology that is coming into play now that could also be very useful. And then if you get into trouble and you make a phone call, each area has a search and rescue group, and some of them are bigger and better funded than other ones. So what will happen is the sheriff will contact search and rescue, they will mobilize, and then they will send out a search. If there is, an imminent threat, they will try to bring in Flight for Life. And the challenge with Flight for Life is it's difficult to land. You have to have a flat spot. And what will often happen is Flight for Life will land, maybe some search and rescue will hike up, get you, bring you back down, load you in the helicopter. If you're really fortunate, Colorado does partner with the National Guard, and when available, the National Guard will help out with a training exercise, and they will send a Black Hawk helicopter or something that can just pluck you right off the mountain. Ryan Richardson is actually ridden in a Black Hawk helicopter when one of his climbing partners was injured on Crestone Peak. And so do you want to say something quick about that experience, Ryan? What you learned?
Yeah. I think the biggest takeaways from that really are just, if something happens, a lot of people think that you can pull out one of the devices that Nick mentioned earlier, whether it's the Garmin or the Spot or even cell phone now. The iPhone has, satellite texting capabilities, and you press a button and say, hey, I need help. And, great. It's kind of like an Uber, 10, 15 minutes later, somebody shows up and helps you out. And the reality is it often is not nearly that fast. In fact, most of the time, it actually takes hours before something like this happens, where there's a helicopter landing. And there's a lot of factors that go into it. Like Nick said, sometimes they can't fly. And if you're fortunate, yeah, sometimes the Colorado National Guard will help out. In our case, we had an injury on Crestone Peak at a little over 13,500 or so in the Red Gully. And it was almost 7 hours between the time that we signaled for help on a spot device at the time and the Black Hawk landed. And actually the only reason that they were able to even fly was they actually had night vision and came in and thankfully picked us all up. There was 4 of us in the group, and then dropped us off in Crestone to medical services. But yeah, that was one of those things that you still, even though that turned out okay, still definitely make sure you have the right systems with you, because it might be a long, cold wait, for that to happen. So.
All right, thanks, Reggae.
Yeah.
And one of the best things you could do is when you go hiking, tell somebody that you're going hiking. A lot of times, someone will go out by themselves and something will happen and nobody will even recognize that they're gone for a couple days. And then by the time they send out a search and rescue, they're already a couple days behind. So, we all do this every time we go out, just leave a note for somebody or a friend and just say, hey, where are you going? On Saturday, I'm going to go hike Mount Bierstadt. I'm going to do the West Slopes and I'm going to be on the Standard Trail. I'm going to be with Mary and Ryan. My plan is to start here, go up to the Winona Pass Trailhead. I should be back at the car sometime around, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. And then just say, hey, if you haven't heard from me by 7 o'clock at night, call the Clear Creek County Sheriff, and then remember to call that person and tell them that you made it down. That's important. But what will happen now is if night comes and the sheriff gets a phone call, the sheriff will send somebody to the trailhead and they will look for your vehicle. And if your vehicle is there, then they will know that you were on the mountain. If your car is not there, then I'm not sure what they would do. I think they would wait. But if your vehicle is there, then they will send out a search and rescue right away. And somebody might find you, within that night. So you don't have to wait out there for a couple of days. So that's a good thing to do. Also, if you go backpacking or anytime you just go do something by yourself, it's a good idea to do that. Okay, so that wraps up most of my slides. I'll talk just very briefly about 14er.com events. We have a fun community that is always doing something. In addition to hiking, I guess it's usually drinking. There are a number of happy hours that occur. I think probably the biggest one right now is Colorado Springs. You guys are rocking it down there, Mary. The Boulder Happy Hour, Ryan is playing that a couple times. Denver has one intermittently. There is a Castle Rock one that's happening. I've seen a golden one pop up every once in a while. So if you're living in the Front Range, there are 14er happy hours near you. And every once in a while, someone will plan one in Kansas or on the West Slope or other places. A group of us are getting together to do trail work. That should say on Mount Democrat in late June this year. And you guys are welcome to join if you want. Drop some info in the chat. Give me an email address and I'll send you the info if you want to come help build some trails for a weekend. We also have the fall gathering takes place in September. This is an open invite. It's near Lake City where people get together and camp for a weekend and go hike some peaks. This is a really good place to meet people. And then we also have a winter welcomer on Quandary Peak, which is usually around Halloween, which is kind of when there's snow on the peak. And it's a chance to go hike with some experienced people and learn a little bit about winter conditions before it's full on winter. And then we occasionally have a spring gathering, which only seems to happen every 3 or 4 years. So it'd be fun if we got that going again. Here's some details on our trail work weekend. We're going to be on Mount Democrat, June 20th and 21st. If you want to come work one or both days, you are welcome to join us. Give me your email in the chat and I will sign you up, or I can give you more information if you want to learn more about it. So here is my contact information. I'm Nick Gianoutsos. I'm on Facebook, Instagram. I don't do a ton of social media, but I am pretty active on Facebook. So if you want to send me a friend request, and if you guys get out and go hike your first 14er, send me a photo. I love every year somebody goes and hikes Bierstadt or Quandary for the first time, and they send me a photo and they said, I watched your talk, and then we went and hiked. I really like that. So that's great. And then the last thing I'll say is that if you enjoyed tonight's talk, um, and you felt like it had value, please feel free to make a donation to the Colorado 14ers Initiative. Anything helps, even a couple dollars. And they're the ones who are out there taking care of the tundra, building trails. They're the people that we volunteer with. All your money will go to supporting trails in Colorado. And with that, we can begin the question and answer portion. And we are going to include Ryan, Mary, Bill, and some of the other 14er admins with us. So, Ryan, do you want to orchestrate the questions? And thank you. Thanks, everybody, for joining us tonight.
Yeah, I figure we can kind of keep it easy. I figure we'll kind of go with what we've got in the chat so far. And I can pull it up and we can read them and kind of go through them. And obviously, if you have anybody else has questions here, yeah, throw them in there. We'll kind of address them. And then between the group of us, we've got people that have got all kinds of different experience in just about everything. So usually we can get through and figure out pretty quickly what's the best situation is. I'll go all the way up here. We had a couple at the top. I had somebody ask about are there any specific strategies for altitude issues as far as medicine goes? That one we actually partially answered there in the chat a little bit as well. I can actually help with that a bit. Some people you can use Diamox. Some people use Advil ahead of time. Mary was mentioning as well. Honestly, though, one of the bigger things is just make sure you hydrate and have the right food. Just that alone, a lot of people do not realize how quickly you can get dehydrated, and that very, very quickly will lead to a lot of issues, including the headache and everything. So, I don't know, Nick, you want anything else to add on that one specifically?
No. Nope, I agree with that. I should preface it by saying we are not medical doctors and not qualified to give any medical advice.
When in doubt, PCP is your best bet. But those, it's kind of one of those things. Self-care does go a long way. So, yeah. This one actually was kind of an interesting one of the earlier ones, but in a little more detail. And this was Donna had noted and said, she loves 14ers.com and has used it quite a bit, but then noticed also when sometimes people post in Colorado 14ers group, people are sometimes kind of shut down and redirected towards 14ers.com. What's the appropriate interaction in other groups? Is it really meant for sharing pictures, looking for meetups? I'd really kind of love to know. This is how I found out about it. I was asking about, seeing that people are hesitant to post about it. So also for those of you who don't know me, I'm Ryan Richardson. I'm one of the admins on the 14er Facebook group. We've got a couple of us also here in the chat as well. Usually it's one of those things, a lot of questions we tend to find, sometimes they'll be repetitive where it's very basic stuff and like, hey, what's the easiest 14er? Hey, is there, a list of things I should take? Oftentimes, yes, we'll direct them. Bill's put a lot of effort into 14ers.com, making the information just super easy, very extensive. And the biggest thing, what we want to do is real quickly, take and get that person to all that information and quickly and easily put that up there and say, yep, take a look at this. That's literally what it was built for. So a lot of the times with the hiking groups, we tend to like questions a lot more that are a little more complex where, okay, great. Maybe something about, hey, somebody's personal experience on a hike or, something that, isn't necessarily clear about, hey, I want to do, a hike on this mountain in October. I'm not seeing many trip reports or conditions. Would somebody recommend this route versus this route? Okay, that's probably a more appropriate question for debate. But we also have with 90,000 something people in the group. Sometimes it can be hard when a lot of people will post questions that very quick. Here's a huge page that's got everything you need. So we try to. Bill's done such a wonderful job. We really try to take and just point things there. And it's not that we don't like you posting. No, not at all. We just want to make sure, hey, if it's already out there and we put that effort's been put into it, great. We want to get you that. And so obviously the interactions, the Facebooks, all that is theirs. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was saying, let's keep questions going.
Yep. So let's see here. Hydration. Also, Faith had a question here and said, are early starts for all year or more of just a summer thing because of the lightning? I figure I'll let you.
Great question. Definitely in the summer because of the lightning. If you're doing like winter hikes, you can definitely start when the sun starts coming up. But usually we still start pretty early. Like in August, September, we're still starting pretty early, even if we're having a really nice weather forecast. I don't know. Bill, you have any thoughts on
And
that one?
starting early in some of the snowy months, like you talked about earlier, is to take advantage of that firm snow to be able to walk on hard snow in the morning, get down before you're what we call post-holing in deep snow, just collapsing snow. And in winter, some early starts are required if you're doing longer hikes, just so you have enough daylight because the days are shorter. So that's all.
I would piggyback onto Bill's a little bit and even say even the summer peaks, a lot of the reason to start early, even if weather's not a factor is that, if you run into something unforeseen and you need that extra time, you've got the daylight. Even if it's a bluebird day and you end up starting, let's just say at noon and all of a sudden you run out of light, that might be a problem. So kind of it's one of those, you set yourself up for success. If you start earlier, you don't have to worry about that quite so much.
Yeah, and some of these peaks, as you get towards the harder peaks, even just class 3 peaks, these routes can be very tedious. And if you're not used to it, it can take much longer than somebody who can just kind of run through difficult terrain. It might take you many more hours than it would if it was a walk-up hike like a class 1 or class 2. So certainly the difficulty and the difficult rock like Nick was talking about can add a lot of time to different people's climbs. So starting early is almost always the low-hanging fruit to make it more successful.
Don asked and said, can you address dropping packs? I can see it from both sides. When I was crossing Angel's Landing, I asked a ranger if I could leave my pack and come back, and she said it absolutely goes against leave no trace, and it's a danger to species and ecosystem, so now I'm not sure. That one, Bill or Nick, I think that was probably a good one to talk about in terms of leaving your pack lower down on a mountain or, separating from it.
Yeah, it's not a good idea to leave your pack for a couple of reasons. Number one, marmots love the sweat. You sweat into your backpack, and they will eat anything that you sweat on, including your trekking poles. So you leave your pack there, the marmots might come literally tear it up. The other thing is a lot of times people drop a pack and get up there, and then they might need something, water or, some medicine or something. And so I think the conventional wisdom is don't drop your pack. Although I can't say that we haven't probably all done it at one time or another.
Yeah, definitely not recommended for those reasons you mentioned, but also if you're on a popular 14er and you drop your pack near the trail, some unsuspecting person might think that somebody lost their pack and pick it up and bring it down to the trailhead, and then you come back down from the summit and your pack's gone. They might have been thinking they were helping somebody, but you just lost all your gear until you get back to your car, including maybe your food and water. Don't do it.
I would even add on there too. There's been some cases that have actually turned out really poorly, and dropping a pack was part of it. There was a situation a few years ago, actually on Fall on Mount Shavano, and somebody dropped his pack. I'm obviously giving this a very TLDR summary sort of thing, but dropped his pack, went up and summited, lost daylight on the way down. Goes back to that previous note we had. And ended up basically didn't have the right gear and shoes and had to stumble down the mountain in the dark. Ended up having to have his legs amputated. Search and rescue. And the pack, well, it was not the one single thing that led to the outcome. It was a definite factor. And so, yeah, generally not a good idea to separate those, the most important things that may save your bacon are going to be in that pack. So great question. Tom asks, any tips on deciding whether to camp at the trailhead the night before versus getting a room nearby the trailhead? Is that common? What are the risks with each? Bill, Nick, either one of you guys want to grab that one?
Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, I'll go ahead.
You
Yeah,
like a
you
good
got
hotel room.
I don't know how to interpret that, Bill.
I can't offer any advice. I sleep in my truck almost every time.
Yeah,
So
and I usually sleep in a tent next to Bill's truck because anyway, I'll back that up. Yeah, sleeping at the trailhead's pretty common, especially when you start climbing peaks on the other side of the state. You might be driving out of, Denver after work on a Friday night and rolling in. Yeah, sleeping in your car is pretty standard. People usually set up in the back of the truck or a way that they can lay down in their car. The trailhead works pretty good or pretty well, except you don't know who's going to come rolling in at what hour of the night and what time people are going to start hiking. So sometimes you get woken up. So sleeping in your car, maybe a quarter mile or half mile away from the trailhead's often a good idea. But staying in a hotel's not a bad idea either. I mean, some people, have a hard time sleeping on the ground or they have a back condition and they're like, I just sleep a lot better in a bed, and that's totally fine. The other option is you can backpack in a mile or two and then set up your camp and sleep along the route. And that will, kind of give you a head start in the morning and get you away from the noise in the trailhead. But there aren't really, I wouldn't say there's a lot of like dangerous trailheads or places where I would say don't camp. You just might have people coming and going at all hours of the night. And not everybody's there to hike a 14er. I mean, they may be there jeeping or doing other activities, so they may not go to bed as soon as it gets dark and wake up early and those kind of things.
I'd also
You want
throw
to
in
add
there
anything
add
to?
and say one thing is, some of it ends up being trial and error. Ultimately, do what gives you the best night's sleep. That's going to give you the best chance at success for the peak next day. I'm kind of with Nick and Bill. I tend to sleep in my car quite a bit. But it's one of those things. Yeah, if you don't sleep well at altitude, if you get woken up easily from stuff like that, yeah, hotel room might be the better option. You're better slept. You can get to bed early and not be bothered. So sometimes it's a little bit of trial and error. There isn't a right or wrong answer, but definitely consider that the more sleep you have, you're going to be better set up for success.
and also consider that like a large number of the 14ers, you're not going to have a hotel anywhere near that you're going to want to stay at because it'd be such a long period of time to try and get to the trailhead in the morning. Peaks like San Luis Peak and some of the other ones in the San Juans, it's better just to try and figure out how to camp locally. You'll have a better chance of starting earlier, which is almost always going to improve your day.
Next question up here. Tim was asking, when is normal climbing season? Bill, I feel like that's got you written all over it here.
Oh, every day of the year, of course. Uh, it's just generally in Colorado, it's the summer months. We want it's a much different skill set to hike and climb on snow. So once the snow is mostly melted, as Nick talked about, you might cross some patches of snow with it here and there, but that's usually generally the start of the season. And the end of the season generally is Labor Day. Cold weather comes in, people become just uninterested. It just totally changes. And weather can come in fast. We get less of the monsoon season in September. We don't get as much rain, but we'll get big snowstorms. They happen. And we'll get cold temps and high winds. So it's generally June through to the beginning of September.
Good
And a little bit of May this year.
Yeah. Another thing I'll plug, it's a little early for it, but it won't be long before we'll start getting into the later months there in September. And keep in mind, if you're interested in trying to extend that typical hiking season, there's a great guide for what it's like to hike in winter. It's on Bill's site there. Take a look. That gives you an idea of what's different from hiking in summer. So that way, it kind of gives you an idea to compare and contrast a little bit. And then also Nick talked about the Winter Welcomer. That's an event that happens early. It's not really winter yet, definitely not by the calendar, but it's starting to get colder, more snowy, and so you can kind of get a taste of, if you want to try extending your hiking season, that's a good option. Let's see here. Tom was asking if you notice altitude symptoms, would it be good to just pause at that altitude for, say, 10 to 15 minutes to adjust, and then try to continue to go higher, or is it more likely not to adjust and so just go down from that point?
Yeah, I would say so you're not really going to acclimate quick enough. 10 to 15 minutes isn't going to be enough time to acclimate. It would be, you could take that time to drink water and eat and see if maybe you're dehydrated and if that helps. But waiting at that altitude generally is not going to make altitude symptoms get better unless it's like a dehydration or a food issue. Um, so yeah, it's okay to kind of, take a break and give it a few minutes and think about it. But waiting, I don't think is going to help in most cases.
Good point. This is actually something we answered a little bit directly in replies, but I think it's still good to bring up to the overall broad audience. Aaron was asking about the 46er and have a decent amount of hikes. When you can filter water from a water source, is it hiking here 14ers? Is that similar, or is this more limited an option? Bill and Nick, I think it's probably a good one for either of you guys in terms of water sources on the 14ers. How easy is it to come by compared to especially the East Coast?
Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, usually we bring all of our water with us. There are a few exceptions, like Capitol Lake, if there's or Snowmass Lake. Um, there's chances where there's solid water, where there's always water, like a lake, you'll be okay. But once you start getting high, there really aren't rivers, and then you just get kind of seasonal runoff from snow melt. And then it's kind of a guessing game of whether there's actually going to be water there. And then it also takes time to filter a little bit of water. So usually we plan on bringing all of our own water, unless, again, it's like Capitol Lake, Snowmass Lake, then you might be able to refill. Then you could guarantee there would be water there.
I'd also throw on there for this year, because of how low the snowpack is, there's a lot of, you might have streams that normally would be running that you could get water from. This year, it's going to be an absolute crapshoot. There's a lot of stuff that I would normally consider that this year it might not be running just because of how dry it is. So this year I think would be a particularly bad year, and I like to build on what Nick was saying. I always plan, enough water, full round trip, then usually an extra 500 milliliters of emergency reserve sort of thing, just in case.
Right. And my rule is usually if it's a day trip, bring all my water. If it's an overnight trip, I'm backpacking in, even just for one night, I'm bringing my filter. Because for a day trip, the filter weighs weight too. It's not a very light thing. You can use iodine, but it's best to use a regular water filter. Might as well just bring an extra liter of water. Just bring what you need and more. You can always dump it halfway down when you're getting a mile from the trailhead and you're sick of carrying an extra 2 liters of water. Dump one of them or give it to a buddy.
Good.
And that was from Aaron was a 46er. So I think Dave Scotsman was also a 46er.
Yeah. So this is another one that came up. No Calabria was already touched on. But what other 14ers require some sort of reservation permit, park pass? He notes Long's Quandary, any others? Yes, there are. Bill, this might be a good one for you in terms of where you're limited a little bit by a permit or a reservation at all.
Oh, you're putting me on the spot. Well, there's a few trailheads like Quandary. I think Sherman or the Democrat group now is a small fee to park, but there's some that have parking fees. The biggest problem, other than Culebra, which is a $150 reservation ahead of time, which is probably already all booked out for the summer. The other biggest problem is the Maroon Bells. They put in regulations to reduce hikers going into the Maroon Bells Snowmass Wilderness. So getting a reservation for camping around Crater Lake to be able to more easily hike those peaks is very difficult now and takes some planning. Even getting parking to do day hikes in that area is very difficult. Now, Nick wasn't talking much about the more difficult peaks, but just to get into that area, if you wanted to get in there and do some backpacking and check out those peaks or anything, it's very difficult to get into, to camp and to park. You have to take a shuttle if you don't have a parking permit, which means you're starting later in the morning, not conducive to climbing 14ers. There are some other peaks that are accessible, like Castle, in that area in the Elks that don't require permits, but really it's the Maroon Bells area that's a problem. And the additional restrictions on that wilderness include Capitol and Snowmass that have backpacking restrictions where you need a permit. It's a cheap permit. You can get it through recreation.gov, but there are a very limited number of those. So aside from the parking issues, the Maroon Bells Wilderness area, Aspen area, is really the biggest problem.
I'd also add honorable mention too, just because it's not directly permitted, but the Chicago Basin Group, unless you really want to hike a long way, which, hey, if you're there to hike, you might as well have a little mileage, I guess. But most people will want to take the Silverton Durango train to get dropped off at Needleton, and then just from there, it's about a 6.75 mile hike to kind of where people camp. So you have to get train reservations. Those also do fill up. So that's something that where you really want to make sure you plan ahead on that one. And we often see, especially on the Facebook group or the forum, we'll see people, especially as you're getting into the end of summer, people are trying to finish, and they're looking for reservations to be able to join somebody. Hey, I want to have tickets, I want to join someone's group, because they, haven't thought about that, and all of a sudden realize that, yep, they need to be able to get out there. So that's kind of another one where they're not permitted directly and there's not reservations directly, but you do have to think about the train. And if you do want to hike, it adds quite a few miles. And I think it's almost 2,000 vertical when you're on the way back out to get to Mullis Pass. So,
also not cheap. I think it's $120 for a train ticket.
Yep, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
So those are definitely there. Bill, this one's got you all over it. Do you have dates for the September Fall Gathering?
We do?
No, I know.
I don't know. Where's Taylor?
I know, right? Typically,
last year,
I'll grab it.
Go ahead.
Typically we usually do it, and there's been some debate on this one the last few years. We usually do it last weekend of September is typically the planned weekend that we usually target. The goal is always, and we've been shocked sometimes at how much it can vary, just literally one weekend, but typically the goal is always to have it kind of right in the peak of fall colors. That's kind of an iffy thing each year to figure out when that will be. But then we don't want to go too late. Usually when you get into that first week in October, there's usually a snowstorm that comes through around that time. And although it can be impressive visually, sometimes that can make the hiking not be quite as fun. So we kind of always target usually that last week in September, sometimes the first in October, but I think we've kind of been aiming last week in September. So,
and we hope to try and do it down in the San Juans again this year.
Yep, so good to be thinking about.
It's fun. It's a good
I've got
time.
Ashley's. I got Ashley's information there. So,
yep.
Sorry, Bill, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I was just going to plug the Fall Gathering. It's a fun time. I try to go every year. It's nice to meet so many people down there, and that area has so many opportunities for hiking, group hikes on not so difficult mountains. It's a good time.
Yep, I agree. I've been doing it. This will be 11 years. Well, I missed last year, ironically, because I was actually out here in New York for work. Hoping to avoid that this year. But as Nick and Bill both talked about, it's really a fun time, and it's everybody has that shared passion of hiking. We all get together, camp out, swap stories, and there's just no shortage of awesome peaks in that area to hike. So definitely consider popping it on your calendar. I'm already thinking about requesting that time off right now while I'm thinking about it. So I would definitely suggest that as well. Natalie asked, do you need to take Diamox before you hike up, or can you take it when symptoms start? I'll grab that one and say that's one of those ones. I have not used it, but that's one of those ones I would definitely talk to your PCP a little bit about if you're kind of having that sort of thing. We want to always be careful. Different people react differently to things. That's something just ask your doctor about real fast and see what they recommend. I'm pretty sure I've heard most people take it before and it's more preventative. But I would consult your PCP on that. Kind of similar, Tim was asking any comments of supplements, can help in terms of the high altitude. I would probably say same sort of thing, unless anybody else has anything to add on that specifically. I can't really speak to that too much. Um, okay, here's a fun one. So Anonymous Pica, an awesome name by the way. Two thumbs up for the Pica, and I'm sure from CFI they love those too. What are each of the hosts' favorite 14ers? Nick, you're the MC here. Go first.
My favorite is Wetterhorn, um, which is down by Lake City. It's a class three. It's absolutely beautiful. It's kind of short and has a really fun class three section right at the end. So I love doing that one. Bill, what's your favorite
Bill.
peak? I don't think I know.
You know, my favorite 14er
Laundry.
no, that's my first 14er and the one I've skied 1,000 times. Crestone Peak is my favorite 14er down in the Sangres. It's a beautiful peak. It's still class three, not too difficult. Incredibly cool rock. And I've had a couple of amazing experiences there, both skiing and in summer hikes. So
Yeah, Mary, how about you?
It's a tie between Tories and Crestone Needle. So can I have a favorite class 2 and 3 and a favorite class 3 and 4? I like
no,
Tories because of the route options, and I like Crestone Needle because it's just a super fun climb.
right.
Yeah, such a
Oh
great area.
man. For me, man, I actually am gonna go with San Juan's as well. I actually have two down there. Wetterhorn was special. That was my second as a kid, so it has some special memories there. I love to kind of Nick's comment. I think it's, in my opinion, it's kind of one of those like perfect 14ers. It's a very easy, beautiful class one start. Gets into a little short section of class two, and then an easy class three section. And so it's just kind of that like I've likened it to kind of the golden retriever or yellow lab of 14ers. It's just friendly, fun, and the views are great. Runner up for me would also be Handy's over there by Lake City. Handy's is even easier, class one or two, depending on the route you're doing it. I've since, that was actually my very first peak. I've since gone back and done all the routes and done it in all 4 seasons and loved it in each different way. So that's mine. Let's see here. Alrighty, what else do we got? We already talked on the pack. All right, let's see here. Bill, this is a good one for you here. Is there any information available on 14ers.com about which only looking at class one or two summits and routes that are more appropriate for children that are roughly 10 to 14? We have kids that are experienced hikers who have done a couple 13ers and they're looking to tackle a 14er this summer.
For kids, huh? Well, I think it would just generally be sticking with class one or easy class two, but short routes. If you look on the site, there is a page that shows the easiest 14ers, and it just shows the routes. I think it's under the climbing menu. But then it breaks those down by the amount of elevation gain and the distance, round trip distance. So I would just stick to those easiest ones. They're the easiest ones to keep kids on the trail. Although some kids learn how to class three scramble at a young age, but just for starting kids on 14ers, I would stick with the easiest routes, the shortest routes that have trails to the summit. And those are all gathered on one page from that climbing menu. You can also look in if there's a little bit more information about that, and when it comes to the risk factors, that might be interesting when it comes to kids. Reading through that getting started section, also in the climbing menu. Hope that helps.
Yeah, absolutely great. And I would add on there, yeah, poke around on 14ers. Bill's got it. You can slice and dice things a lot of different ways. So, it's really quite amazing. Bolting right onto that, kind of a good segment because you talked about Bill, some of the risk factors on there. Any guidance on avoiding rock slides and cautions to take to avoid a rock slide? Nick, I don't know, Nick or Bill. I feel like that might be one that you guys can both touch on a little better.
I mean, it kind of depends on the peak and the route, you know. Probably one of the biggest things is staying on route. When you get off route, things get really loose really fast. The route can be loose, but people hiking it over and over again tend to stabilize it a little bit. Once you step off the route, you're in kind of unmitigated terrain. It gets really loose. But some of the peaks just go straight up, very loose class two gullies, and it's just loose and kind of nasty. Um, so one thing I forgot to mention is that if you kick a rock or you see a rock coming, yell rock. Even if you didn't kick it, just make sure everybody knows because people are like looking at their feet coming up and something might be coming down at them. Bill, you want to add on that?
Yeah, a little bit more about the rock fall. Just by definition, the class one trail routes they're going to have a low risk of rock fall. But if you look at any of those route descriptions on 14ers.com, you'll look at those risk factors. You can see the rating for rock fall. Just about, like I said, all the class one should have a low rating. Anything class two, if you're on a standard route, which those are designated as the standard ways the normal way to go up the peak, and usually the ones maintained by the CFI, those are also less likely to have any major rock fall and risk of a rock slide. It's when you get into non-standard alternate routes, you get into class three routes where there's a difficult approach, no trail, the trail is gone, and you're going through some sketchy boulder fields and such. But for class one and class two, you should be able to avoid rock slides easily.
I agree with that. And you can also take a look, and like Bill was saying, just to kind of reiterate, double check, and you can look in each of the peaks and then see what the rockfall rating is. So that kind of gives you at least a little bit of idea. Look at some of the pictures too. I mean, and like Nick had commented, the difference between like Crestone Needle and the Bells. You can look at some of those pictures that Bill has, and you can kind of see some of them are a little more solid. The rocks are in place, and other ones, I mean, it just looks like someone just dumped a bunch of rocks on the side of a hill, and they're just sitting there waiting for somebody to bump them. So that kind of can give you an idea, and that's also a good one too. Even on the Facebook group, that's a good one to ask a little bit about. People's perceptions are going to vary a little bit, but to Bill's point, generally the lower in class you go, the better off you're going to be. This is actually a really good one. We touched on this just a bit earlier. Where and how do you gain a skill set for winter climbing? Bill, you want to talk about the winter guide a little bit?
Winter climbing. Well, there's a good set of summer skills is the best start, obviously. And then it's really finding people with similar interests if they do want to. You don't want to start winter climbing as a solo climber unless you have experience, a lot of experience, and you know what you're doing. Or a skier, so you've had a lot of time in the backcountry dealing with snow because you have a lot of avalanche risk that you have to deal with. So finding the right partners that are committed to this and starting out real small, picking routes maybe on popular 14ers and then doing them a little off season, maybe in December or maybe in May when there's a lot more snow, or even in April. That's the best way to get into it. If you think you're going to just go out and tackle Mount Massive in January on a heavy snow year, you're going to be sorry you did that. You're going to waste some gas money because it's very difficult. The difficulty factor on these peaks goes up dramatically with snow on them. The danger factor goes up dramatically as well. Avalanche danger, slipping on and falling down an ice slope or just a steep snow slope. It can be quite dangerous. So while there are big dangers on summer 14ers, there are much bigger dangers even on some of the easy 14ers in the winter. So I think finding the right partners, even on Facebook, you could, or on 14ers.com forum, you can look for other people that maybe want to bring someone else along if they're doing easy winter hikes and go with another party and see if you like it. Don't go out solo and just try it on your own. You'll just be disappointed, or you could get yourself in trouble.
Yep, no, I agree, and that's something also as well. I would say that the biggest thing, even to book in kind of a little bit what Bill was saying, is in winter, basically situations tend to be a lot less forgiving. There's just less margin for error, and where you could make a couple mistakes in summer, you might have a bad day, but you're probably going to be okay. In winter, a couple minor things, and you could have a really bad day. And there have been some accidents where, people had to have limbs amputated, frostbite. That's usually the more common one, but there's definitely some things that can really go south pretty quickly. So it's good to make sure to not only research and learn about it, but then also start kind of building up to it. The winter welcomer is a great way to do that, where you can kind of comment. Again, it's not quite winter conditions yet, but gives you a taste of what it's like. With the colder wind is a big factor. It's unbelievable how bad the wind is up there most winter days. If you get a winter day that's just breezy and or less, that's rare. Boy, enjoy it. There's been times that it's strictly the wind has turned me and a lot of people I know around.
For sure.
So that's just that alone is it. So kind of build to it, I think. That is all the questions I had in the Q&A. Does anyone else have any questions? Still got a good, healthy group.
I was going to say, Tom made a comment that at the Maroon Bells, he says somebody put up a scamming QR code by the bus, and people were scanning it and paying for a bus, and they were going to a fake site. So be careful.
Oh,
sounds like something somebody would do.
That's how I'm paying for the site now.
Yeah. Fake QR code.
It's actually not a bad idea.
Oh, man. But anybody else have any questions? Like I said, we're happy to answer stuff. Anything's fair game. The whole point is make sure people have got all the information they need, and don't be shy. There's not any dumb questions. Done this for a while, and always happy to help.
Yeah. I think real quick, Ryan is on a business trip and he's joining us from New York City. You want to show us out the window?
Oh man.
Here. Maybe you can't, but he's in a sky. He's a corporate man now. So
does he have pants on?
Yeah, I don't know if he's gonna follow me over there.
I don't know what happens.
I do have a great view. I'm in Midtown Manhattan and have a spectacular view of the Empire State Building and One World Trade Center right behind me. So
he's a lowlander and he's traded his climbing life to be a corporate man. I'm just teasing you.
Yeah, as I say, the best I'm getting on these trips is hiking the stairs up. I think it's like 700 feet to go from the ground all the way up here. So this might do me in a little bit for the CFI trip, Nick. Hopefully not, but I'm out here more than I'd like.
Wait, we got a last minute addition. Joe says, any thoughts on marmots causing vehicle damage in the San Juans?
Ooh,
great question, Joe.
Yeah. If you drive a Toyota.
I'll chime in on that one. I have had the misfortune of having that happen, not once, but twice. Once was annoying, the second time sucked. Yes, marmots absolutely can damage your car. The other one that a lot of people don't think about and don't tend to notice, but it kind of depends on what you're doing, is porcupines.
The worst.
Yeah. So here's the kind of the TLDR on them. If you are parking your car at higher elevations, marmots, usually you don't see marmots a ton below 9,000-10,000 feet, but if you're up, especially some of the really high trailheads, I'll give a couple examples, like the Mount Sneffels upper trailhead, places like that where you're way up there. You absolutely can have marmots. They love to chew on brake lines and electrical under the car. Jeep Jeeps is what I had multiple Jeeps. It is an absolute real thing. The first time I was actually parked near Engineer Pass, and I was doing a 13er there, and came back and they had chewed my EVAP pump, and basically that ended up being like $300 or $400 to replace, but thankfully didn't disable the vehicle. I just had my check engine light on the entire way back to Denver. That was annoying. Second time I was in the Sangres, and that time I had parked on Hermit Pass to do some 13ers there, just a little bit north of the Creststones. I actually caught the marmot right as I got back to my car, crawling out from underneath the vehicle. It had gotten its head between my skid plate and gas tank, and it chewed 5 of the 7 wires that powered my gas pump and my fuel gauge and chewed them apart. I was thankful that I crawled underneath there and saw the damage, and I was very thankful that I had just randomly had two clothespins and I had a roll of electrical tape. So thankfully, I was able to scrape the wires, kind of put them together, tape them, and then clothespin them to then be able to start my vehicle and get back to Denver. Had I not had even one of those things, I'm not sure I would have gotten out of there without a really expensive tow.
All right. So what can you do to
Um,
prevent that, Ryan?
Great question, Nick.
Ride with your buddy, ride with your friend, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, that helps.
Yeah.
I actually, a lot of people, this is one thing I usually am pretty passionate about because I played around with just about everything. A lot of people you'll sometimes see on forums are like, oh, put mothballs out there. No, those do not work. And then your car smells terrible. The best thing is actually a physical deterrent. Amazon has plastic snow fencing, and you'll definitely see cars that are like this at trailheads. California, I've seen quite a few of them out there. So I have one that's about 2.5 feet tall, and I literally wrap my vehicle with that fencing. And basically, all you got to do is make your car just not quite that accessible. Most animals, they get bored and move on to hopefully the next person. And maybe you'll get lucky and they didn't wrap their car, and the marmot or porcupine at night. I should add that porcupines are nocturnal, and you need to worry about those camping at just about all elevations. But yeah, ever since I started doing the marmot guard method about 10 years ago, zero problems. But I have woken up several mornings and found porcupine quills on the outside of my fencing, and I'm very glad that nothing has happened since then. So Amazon for, I don't know, probably 60, $70 now, something like that. But yeah, plastic snow fencing. I just have a couple bungee cords with it. Works great. So
I had a different approach that I've used in the past is if you go to like a hunting or outdoor store, they sell different urine that hunters use to mask their scent, and coyote urine can buy it in a small bottle and squirt it around your car. And marmots don't want to go hang out where they think a coyote's hanging out. That seems to have worked for me. I haven't tried it a ton of times, but I've never had a problem.
Yeah.
But I also say that usually with marmots, most of the time marmots aren't a problem. But when you're looking at like trail conditions, you'll see people will say we're having problems with marmots or whatever else at this trailhead. And so I think that's when you want to be really careful. But most of the time you don't have to, shrink wrap your car to keep them out.
I've been using the coyote urine granules, but also I place one of those high pitch rodent deterrents, one under the front, one under the
Ooh.
back. So far, so good. So I'm good.
Are
Tell
they
myself
battery
that's what's
operated?
happening.
They just like a
Yeah.
little,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Yep.
Huh. How long do they
Yeah.
run for?
I haven't had to replace the batteries yet, but I've only used them like I used them on Hermit Pass and a couple times down in the Sangres, other spots in the Sangres and the San Juans, and
Okay.
I haven't had to replace the batteries yet. They're just 3 AA batteries in each, and I think I bought 2 for like $30 on Amazon. But the Forerunners have the tasty soy wires, so trying trying to I had 2 friends that had their wires chewed, Forerunner friends that had their wires chewed in the San Juans last year, so we were all swapping like what works, what doesn't.
yeah, great question. Anybody else have anything you're dying to ask? So it's kind of one of those happy to answer questions. Again, there's no silly questions. We've probably run into just about everything at some point. So happy to give insights on all kinds of stuff. Well, if there's nothing else, we're going once here, folks. A couple seconds. Nick, any kind of final thoughts you have?
I just want to say thanks. Thanks everybody for joining. Have fun, stay safe, and take care of the mountains while you're out there. And
Thanks, Nick.
we'll share I'll put Ryan's email or cell phone in the chat so you can call him anytime you want. I'm kidding.
Nice.
I'll do that.
Eastern
No, and I
time zone
appreciate,
right
I want
now.
to thank Mary for being our trail steward and all of her volunteer work. I want to thank Ryan for being our IT guy. And I would thank our cameo appearance from Bill for making sure that we're talking about the site in a way that you agree with.
Sure.
So
My
appreciate you
pleasure.
guys. And thanks for making an awesome site, Bill.
Thank you. Thanks for doing this. This is the stuff I can't do. I can sit home and write code all day, but
Yeah. Thanks so much
This is
for doing
hard.
this another year, Nick.
You're welcome.
And
This is
thanks
actually our
everybody for
10th
joining, and we
year.
look forward to seeing you on the trails. Yeah, post pictures on the Facebook group, join the forum, post pictures there. Like Nick said, we always love to hear from you. Also, do consider, I do want to take a minute, plug CFI a little bit. Do consider helping out. It is wonderful, gives you an excellent perspective. If you feel like doing trail work, talk to Nick. There's all kinds of opportunities also on their website. Also, too, Mary is also a peak steward. There's always a need for folks to help educate other folks. So, and hey, if you don't feel like doing any of that, but you're like, hey, I got some money and can donate it, they can put that to use too. But yeah, great organization. And again, Bill, thank you so much for making an awesome site and doing this for free for so long. So,
yes, I'm committing to another 4 years of it.
You are?
Yay.
Yay.
I am 2030, 4 more years.
All right, 4 more
We're
years
gonna
of no
we're gonna make this
panicking.
thing we're gonna make this thing 30 years old.
Nice.
That's awesome. We got you on record.
great.
I could change my mind tomorrow. Who knows? No, I'm definitely doing it.
Cool.
All right,
Thanks,
Ryan, you can
everybody.
probably
Great to see you guys.
stop the recording. Yeah.